evening, everybody. Good evening. Thank you. So, yes, I'm Angela Brown-Vann, and I work for Power Interfaith as an organizer. I'm also an ordained minister, so no cursing at me or throwing tomatoes, please. So today, you know how people often say I was today years old. Well, I was today years old when I found out that BFF means best friend forever. I thought that meant best female friend or something like that. So I was today years old when I found out that means best friends forever. And I'll probably forget what that means tomorrow. But my best friend forever is my grandmother. And my best friend forever, my BFF, taught me a lot of things about life. She taught me how to be resilient. She taught me how to not just survive, but to thrive. And so my grandmother was born in the 20s. She was the last of 14 children. And if you listen to her tell the story, she was pampered by her parents because she was sick all the time. She was a mama's girl, she was a daddy's girl, and she didn't leave the house until she was in her late 20s to start her own family, and that was not the norm. And so by the time she started her own family, she knew how to make her own clothes. She knew how to grow her own food. She knew how to survive. She knew what she had to do to take care of a family and survive. And so that's what she would do for her new family. She would survive. My grandfather grew tobacco. They knew how to make it. But what she also had to do in order to survive was stand up to my grandfather, who was an alcoholic. And so what she did in order to survive was one night when he threatened her life, she took a hammer and she had the strength as well as the mental fortitude to help the hammer to his head. And then my grandmother escaped Virginia and made her way to Philadelphia and regained her power with her 4 children. My grandmother escaped that abuse, and she started a new family in Philadelphia. But then my BFF had to endure something else. Her new husband, after he died, she found out that she had to leave her house because he wasn't paying the taxes. So here she is having to endure something else and be resilient again. And I love these stories that she told me because then she said she wasn't going to be out on the street. And so my grandmother in the 70s bought her own property for $8,500. A resilient woman when women didn't do such a thing on their own in the 50s and the 70s. Her stories taught me how to not be afraid of giants. Her stories taught me how to not just survive, but to thrive. Her stories told me how not to be afraid of giants because giants would get in your way. And so when I was 27 years old, when I was diagnosed with a seizure disorder, the first person I saw when I woke up a day later was my grandmother. My grandmother's face in her stories of her resiliency reminded me that everything was going to be all right. All I needed to see was her face. And so, but a few years later, though, after the seizure medications just weren't making me feel good, and every now and then I would have breakthrough seizures. Sooner or later, though, the doctor said, we need to do another MRI. So then they noticed in 7 years, there was a tumor that had been growing on my brain, right? So this tumor that had been growing, now they said, you have to get the brain tumor out. And I think you should get it out right away. So here goes another obstacle. But Grandmom said, we can survive things, and not only survive things, we can thrive. So this is a small thing for you, a brain tumor. Yes, a brain tumor is a small thing for you. So I got the brain tumor out. But here's epilepsy. And so what I learned, though, was that's a small thing. I can overcome these small things, even the epilepsy medication. But what happened was, we talked about menopause right earlier. Menopause came. Menopause and epilepsy, they don't go together. And so I started forgetting things, sleeping all day, getting weaker, and lost my job because of it. But guess what happened? I still remember what my grandmother said. My grandmother taught me how to thrive through it, and I want to pass on what my grandmother said. You can go through obstacles, but are we going to be giants or giant slayers? If you're a giant slayer, you can thrive through it. But if you are a giant, if you're afraid of giants, you're just going to survive it. I would rather thrive through it. That's my time.